going to be taking a look at a game from the 1970s, I believe, called War of the Ring. It was originally, I think, produced by SPI and at least partly co-designed by Richard Berg. And initially, I repurchased this game in the flat tray, and when I got it, it had no cards, and most of the character counters were gone. So I had to make my own cards, which I did, and I had to make my own character cards. And sadly, I think I bought it on eBay, and the person said that it was complete, and it was not complete. And they did offer me a refund, but wanted me to send the game back. And I'm like, no, I didn't bother. I just let it go. So I made some of my own components for it, and I also made some very rudimentary force chits to represent a stack that I could keep off map so I wouldn't have towering stacks and things like that. And it was a little bit easier, since I was playing solitaire, for hidden forces to some degree. Anyway, so what follows is kind of like some commentary on how the gameplay went. So this game doesn't begin, at the period where the book starts. It starts, I think, at where the Fellowship forms at Rivendell. So what I did, I used the components of the game and set up some of the situations. Like in this first picture, you have ring wraiths are searching for the ring in the Shire, but they discover, it's not there because Frodo has already left. And then they continue their search. And in this next picture, they are running into the ring and the ring wraiths in Bree, and this is where they meet Strider. But you get the four hobbits there, and somehow they get away from the Nazgul. And then in this next picture is where somewhere near Bree, where Frodo takes that nasty wound from the bad guys. And none of that's really in the game. The game actually starts with this next, with the characters all alive and well at Rivendell. And that's where the Fellowship actually is formed. So this is where my game starts. And Rohan enters the war by an event card played by the Fellowship. So they start to mobilize. And since the Misty Mountains passes are not open, I don't have a card for that, the Fellowship decides to move south through Moria. And of course, knowing the book, I know that this is not a good idea. Gandalf has the advantage of having Shadowfax, his horse, that can help him really to move around. And then he has the elven sword Glamdring, which I believe he picked up in Rivendell. Frodo is the ring bearer, and he carries Sting, and he also has Mithril Mail, which will protect him somewhat in a fight. The Shadow forces are still searching for these guys, but they are ineffective so far. And so, since the Misty passes are closed, the Fellowship marches toward the gates of Moria, and the Shadow player has sent the Lord of the Nazgul into Dimril Dale. He's going to try to spot these people. And then, as is shown in the photo, you can see I have a not very beautiful homemade counter, Fellowship 1, and that is like a whole group represented by that counter, so I don't need to have a stack. At this point, Gollum is continuing to follow around with the Fellowship, and meanwhile, Rohan's forces are starting to appear. They have army and cavalry deployed in Rohan, and they have deployed cavalry in East Emnet. Then the Fellowship enters the tunnel into the gates of Moria, and of course the Fellowship encounters the Balrog here, And I decided to go somewhat with the books, and Gandalf decides to fight the Balrog. He uses sorcery, which is less effective against the Balrog. I mean, I believe it's a -3 die roll modifier, which I didn't notice right away, but oh well. Nevertheless, the wizard does manage to wound this evil beast, and the battle continues until the Balrog is defeated. But Gandalf is severely weakened. He's not dead, but he has taken some terrific wounds from this fight. So the Fellowship continues with a wounded Gandalf moving through Dimrill Dale. At the same time, Saruman's army is mobilized in Isengard, and the Fellowship finally makes it to Lothlorien. One of the mistakes I made in playing this is I didn't realize for some reason that Shadowfax could not go along with them through Moria. And I should have known that, but I didn't. And now I have Gandalf nearly dead, and he has no horse. So this is not good. The next stage of the journey, Gollum becomes neutral. So now he's not really on the Team Fellowship anymore. He's out for himself. And the Shadow player is continuing to do searches, but it's failing to turn up anything of note. And you can see in this photo that the Fellowship has moved into Lothlorien, where they collaborate with Celeborn, the Elven King of Lothlorien, and Galadriel, the Lady of Lothlorien. Samwise is able to add Galadriel's light to his possessions, and Legolas takes elven rope, which he's going to enjoy using, I'm sure. And on another part of the map, the men of Rohan are continuing to mobilize and to assemble their forces at Helm's Deep. You can see that in the picture here at Helm's Deep, and you can see Isengard is at the top left of the picture, and Saruman has enlisted the aid of the Dunlendings, and the chief of the Dunlendings and a small army are mobilized in Dunland, and more orcs are produced in Isengard. As the journey continues, Gollum continues to be independent. The Shadow player uses the Fierce Storms event. Of course, his searches fail utterly, and I decided to let Gandalf remain behind in Lothlorien for a while, because this will allow Galadriel to heal him somewhat from his earlier wounds. The weather is prohibitive for movement, the fierce storms, so the men of Rohan remain at home, but Saruman continues to mobilize forces. The Nazgul sense the ring in the area of Lothlorien, so they blanket the area in search of the ring bearer, of course. Then Gollum becomes friendly with Frodo and the other hobbits again. So as you know, we read in the book, he goes back and forth in his allegiances. The Fellowship crosses a minor river from Lothlorien into Fanghorn, and they do run into a Dark Rider there, and he successfully spots the group. And he learns that there are 4 hobbits in this group. Then Eomer leads the men of Rohan into an assault, and you can see that in the picture here, against the citadel in Isengard. And this is defended by Saruman and his army and the Uruk-hai. The attack is somewhat successful, and Saruman's forces are reduced by 50%. But since Saruman still controls the citadel here, he decides to break off the combat and to retire into the safety of the fortress. And you can see in the picture again, you've got the siege at Isengard, and Saruman's not too happy about this, but you have the chief of the Dunlendings back in the rear that may end up having an effect. As the journey continues, Gollum continues to befriend Frodo. Gandalf has healed a little bit more after further attention from Galadriel. Then the Fellowship moves out of Fanghorn and into East Emnet, which allows it to become unspotted again. While this is going on, Eomer launches another siege attack against the forces at Isengard. And both sides incur losses again, and Saruman decides to break off the attack. The chief of the Dunlendings moves with his army around the flank of the siege at Isengard, which is now threatening the rear of the men of Rohan. Gollum has become neutral again. He really wants the ring, but he's too scared to do anything about it other than tag along with the group. The shadow searches and it has no effect, but in the meantime, the Fellowship marches directly into one of the Dark Riders. So the company is discovered once again, and Aragorn leads the Fellowship southward, and then Eomer breaks off the siege, and then he leads his men against the Dunlendings. So the outflanking maneuver did work to take their attention away. The Dunlendings are defeated in this battle and are forced to retreat, but again, their flanking maneuver was successful in that it did draw Eomer and the men of Rohan away from Isengard. Since the hobbits have now been discovered, Saruman has been mobilizing the orcs, and the first of these are starting to appear on the map as a threat to the Fellowship. But none have caught up with the Fellowship yet. Again, in this picture, you can see Aragorn is accompanied by most of the Fellowship here, and they've been quite successful in remaining underground despite the size of the group, but you can see all of those dark forces scattered around them, closing in on them. As the game continues, Gollum has now completely switched sides, and he is under the control of the Dark player. So he is clearly a traitor again, but the Fellowship continues on and it avoids being spotted, and they continue moving and they pick up a road in Anorian, and then the Fellowship divides up and now has divided into a third group. So I have the Fellowship split into Fellowship 1, Fellowship 2, and Fellowship 3, and they're all underneath, well, they're all off map, and I have counters to help me with a little bit of fog of war. The Dark Ruler is continuing to mobilize, but he does have limited ability because he has a limit to his shadow points. So you can see I have depicted in the picture some of Sauron's men in the south that are starting to stir along the river Harnen. Gollum continues to be an enemy of the Fellowship, and meanwhile, Gandalf uses Elven Riverboats card from their hand to move from Lothlorien down to the falls of Rhoros, which you can see in the picture here. The Fellowship is led by, the part that's led by Aragorn gets through the Nazgul again, and they march up the road toward the gate of Morannon. The other group of the Fellowship is led by Boromir, and they also avoid detection, and they take cover in the rough area just to the northeast of Minas Morgul. The Shadow player uses resources to move the men from Far Harad toward the eastern entrance of Mordor so that they can try to stop the Fellowship. And then orcs from Nirn sneak through the narrow opening of the mountains. So again, as you see in the photo, you can see the Fellowship Group 3 is depicted underneath that counter, but Gandalf has used the elven boats to get to the falls of Rhoros. So even though he doesn't have Shadowfax, he is making good time. Also, this next picture shows two of the fellowship groups, Group 1 and Group 3. One company is outside of the black gate, and that is Aragorn's group. I believe that's Fellowship 1. And then the company on the riverbanks, Fellowship 3, is Boromir's group. Gollum is still enemy controlled, and he's following the ring bearer closely. The hand orcs have managed to discover the members of one of the fellowship groups, and it happens to be Boromir, Pippin, Merry, and Gimli. The fellowship uses the Black Gate card to cross into the land of Mordor, and somehow during that they have managed to escape the orcs, but it does turn out that Shelob is in there, as she was in the book. She's the giant spider. So Aragorn takes her on and quickly dispatches the spider with the aid of Andúril, the Flame of the West. So in my picture, we see Aragorn there inside Mordor now, and you see the crack of doom. This company continues, and they are discovered by Sauron's orcs, and it is learned that, yes, Aragorn, Legolas, and two hobbits are in the vicinity of Mount Doom. It's a scary place for Frodo and Samwise. Sensing that the ring is near Orodruin, the Nazgul consolidate on Mount Doom, and that uses up all of their shadow points, so there are no other maneuvers. As the game continues, Gollum continues to be on the shadow side, and the party in Mordor is still spotted. So Aragorn and Legolas lead Sam and Frodo up to Mount Doom, and they are greeted there by the Lord of the Nazgul and 4 Dark Riders. So this is really not a good situation. Aragorn ends up getting into battle with the Lord of the Nazgul, and he slays him with Andúril. Then he takes out another one of the Nazgul before he succumbs to his own wounds. Legolas jumps in, but he ends up getting struck down quickly, and Samwise fights also, and he inflicts enough injuries on one of the Dark Riders to knock him out, but Sam ends up getting killed shortly thereafter. And finally, Frodo gets into the fray, and he does have the advantage of the Mithrith Mail and the Elven Sword Sting, but he does slay the remaining of the Nazgul on Mount Doom, but Gollum still lurks. Frodo still has to get that ring to the cracks of Doom, so the mouth of Sauron and Gothmog fly to Orodruin, and things don't look too good with these two against Frodo. So the Gothmog attacks Frodo, and although Frodo suffers another hit, his elven mail is protecting him quite a bit from the deadly blows. And he's using Sting, and he is able to slay Gothmog. However, the mouth of Sauron strikes next, and this time Frodo is slain, and the mouth of Sauron captures the ring, and the shadow player claims victory. And that pretty much is how the game ends. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this game. Designed by Richard Berg in part, and it really has a lot of nostalgia to it, and it does produce a good story even if the game itself is not that great. Anyway, thanks for watching.